don't know if you've heard, but there's a new edition of D&D coming out. I mean, it's not a new edition. I'm sorry. The new stuff will be totally compatible with the old stuff. But I also know that a few of you, not everybody, but a few of you are moving towards newer tabletop games soon if you haven't already converted to Pathfinder. So let's talk about converting adventures from one system to a different system or to a different edition. Okay, this is going to be kind of general. All right, because frankly, I don't know what system or edition you are converting to. If you're converting from 2nd edition D&D to 5th edition, that'll look slightly different than converting 5e to Shadowdark. But your general process is going to be the same. If you want me to do a deep dive, please let me know in the comments and we can do that. Maybe stream it. I don't know. We could do stuff. For ease of explanation, I will be pretending that we are converting an adventure from 5e to Shadowdark because I just recently bought Shadowdark stuff and I'm digging it a little bit. I haven't played anything in Shadowdark yet, but have read the book and, soon. Step 1, understand the core differences between the two systems and set your expectations. You will need a pretty good understanding of both systems, both the one you're porting to, Shadowdark, and the system you're porting from, D&D. This is not to say that you need to be an expert in both systems, but I wouldn't recommend this task to a first-time GM. You need to at least know the system you will be playing in very well so that you can make the adjustments as you go. You also need to understand some of the core mechanics for that adventure module. Sometimes they have special things for that adventure that will also help you represent the feeling of the game in your new system. And again, set your expectations. Remember, you're not going to have a one-to-one conversion. You're trying to aim for the theme and the feeling of that adventure, but put it in your new tabletop. Step 2, adapt the setting and the narrative. I think this is a no-brainer, and this is probably the easier part, right? There's obviously a reason you want to convert to a different system, and that's because you love something about this adventure. So to convert it effectively, you want to pull out several things. You want the main plot line, the key NPCs, and the central story conflict. These are the easiest things to transfer between systems. In particular, you want to make sure that you are maintaining that tone of the adventure. For instance, if you're converting a horror or dark fantasy adventure, it shouldn't suddenly feel like a Feywild adventure, unless that's what you were planning. I don't know. You may also want to either reskin or rename things to match your new system's world or lore. If you do this, I highly recommend you keep a sheet where you keep track of the new names and the old names. So the original D&D names versus what you're naming it for Shadowdark, because I can very much see this being a crazy mess. Adjust the adventure to fit that lore, the religions, the history of the world of your new Shadowdark RPG. If you do that, it will make it easier to pull resources from Shadowdark or in the Shadowdark realm without having to convert every single thing from D&D into Shadowdark. Number 3, this one's a little harder. We're going to adjust the monster stats. The easiest route is to find an equivalent monster, sub that in. But what if they don't exist? Well, if they don't exist, you could look something with either an equivalent difficulty or abilities, and then you can just reskin it, or you could create from scratch. That one I would suggest as a last resort. Remember that capturing the essence of the monster or what that monster is all about is more important than having a one-on-one stat conversion. Instead, look at it and try to understand why they are in this encounter. Do they fit the terrain or the environment? Are they guarding something? Are they an exotic creature in this instance? Is it supposed to be a challenge? Is it supposed to wear down your party before they get to a boss? Think about those sorts of things when you're converting monsters. Step 4, modify the encounter difficulty. You want to try to match the difficulty level of the encounter. Something that could help you in that regard is to find and encounter calculators or balancing apps. Obviously, there's plenty for D&D 5th edition, so you could put those monsters in, see the challenge rating, and then try to mimic that challenge rating in your new system. You may need to add or remove monsters to make it more challenging or less challenging. You could also alter other aspects of encounters too. Terrain could be used to favor PCs or enemies. You could change monster abilities or weaknesses. This is where the understanding of your new system becomes super important. You'll want to make sure you're using your new system's encounter balancing guidelines. And if you are actually converting to Shadowdark, it seems like you'll have to reduce the monster numbers because it seems like Shadowdark encounters are deadlier. But I don't know that from experience, just from what I was reading. You could also replace monster encounters with skill challenges or roleplay encounters instead. You don't have to have every single monster encounter, every single encounter in the book. You just want the general feel. If you like what you're watching, consider supporting me on Patreon, the best way to support creators on YouTube. You can get behind the scenes, plus you can get ad-free versions of my videos. Also, live streams, there's shop discounts, hopefully some paper products coming out, definitely a magazine in the works. There's lots of stuff there. Link in the description. Step 5, you want to convert mechanics like skill checks and DCs. Now, converting from 5th edition to Shadowdark is not difficult here. Same with maybe Pathfinder, wouldn't be as difficult. However, Pathfinder has more skills and more skill proficiency levels. Then there's other systems like MCDM's Draw Steel, where you'll literally have to look and see which are the equivalents. You also have to have a good understanding of what constitutes as an easy, medium, hard, or impossible skill challenge in your target system so that you can adjust the D&D version into your new system. Step 6, you will probably need to adapt or create items and treasure. This is another thing you might be able to find substitutions for. So you may be able to find magical equivalents, but again, you might not. This might mean making up completely new items for your system instead. When you do this, consider the rarity and power levels of items in the D&D adventure and how common magical items are in your new system. You also need to adjust the treasure levels as well as experience levels to the new system. For instance, Shadowdark is a lower magic setting, so you would have less items or less powerful magical items, whereas Pathfinder can probably have pretty equivalent items to D&D. Revise your spells, abilities, and the character options. Equivalents might be available. I find most times they aren't. Focus on recreating the effect, not the exact mechanic. You can apply this to things like the abilities and the character options as well. Consider what options you might want to port over to the new system and how. Shadowdark, you probably don't want to do that. The whole point of Shadowdark is to be a simpler version of 5e. So if you start importing subclasses and classes from D&D, just play D&D. For some adventures, they might work better with a particular class or subclass, or maybe assume you have something like a rogue in your system. You need to consider the abilities of the original work and what might be relied upon to progress the storyline. But just also remember you can change the challenges in the adventure when you port it over as well. Or you can just cut them out completely if it's something you don't want to offer your players. Step 8, you want to tweak the pacing and the experience points. You'll have to adjust XP, and you want to adjust the pacing of the adventure to fit the new system, meaning you want to match progression rate. For instance, 100 experience points in D&D versus Shadowdark, that's 2 very different amounts. Pacing is obviously a little bit more difficult. Sometimes pacing also lends itself to the story or the plot line. So this means you will have to kind of tweak and adjust that aspect as you play. So listen very carefully to feedback from your players on whether things are too difficult or too easy, and just overall how enjoyable the campaign is. Finally, just remember that this is not going to be a direct one-to-one conversion. Your main goal should be just to capture the spirit of the original work in your new system. Don't be afraid to make changes to it and add your own twists. Hopefully, this will help you in your new tabletop adventure. Not a task for a beginner GM. If you are newer to your system, I recommend playing adventures in your new system first and maybe running a pre-made module, which I have a whole video on running modules like that. You might also find that this notebook is super helpful for you. I made a minimalist version of my D&D notebook, but I designed it to work with as many systems as I possibly could. I have more page packs coming out for some of those newer systems as well. So if that's something you were looking forward to, buying the minimal one and adding the pages in later is pretty much what it was meant for. So go check that out in the shop, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.